Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of Sagionic 1027. We are so glad that you decided to join us today, and with us, without fail, I have another one of those guests that are like, you've got to be kidding me. I am so excited to introduce our guest today, but before I officially introduce her, I would like to tell you a little bit about our program. So the basis of our program pertains to the word. So the word Sagionic was dropped down to me when I was in my home in 2019. And I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, Lord, are you just going to randomly say words I've never even heard of in my life? And how am I supposed to look it up if I don't know how to spell it? So then I hear him say Sagionic. So I looked it up. It's Greek. I'm Greek. And the word means movement by movement in human time. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. So kind of like, bringing home my baby bumblebee, you're hanging on to something, a treasure of yours. And then in 2022, a series of events led me to, I was in a dream. And I heard the word, anytime you take your gifts, talents, and abilities and use them to bless others, it is ministry. So our desire, so Sagion by itself means carriers of wisdom. So our desire is to display carriers of wisdom, because those who refresh others will they themselves be refreshed. So with us today, we have, I want to call her a professional carrier of wisdom. This is Rachel. This is Rachel Hauck. And we are so glad. She is a New York best time seller. She travels all across the United States, globally too, Rachel? That's a question mark.
No, I've been
Yet.
invited. Haven't gone yet.
Yet. Okay. So she travels all across the United States. I'm going to call it mentoring others by doing workshops. So, Rachel, we are so glad you're here today. And I know we have a book to go over, we have other things to go over today. So, I just want to welcome you and tell you that today's program is literally all about you. So, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah. And so I guess, if I was thinking of like, where do I start? Where do I start with Rachel? Well, I want to go back because um, there's writing manuscripts everywhere, okay? Whether it be on stones in early ages, right? Or on papyrus. That's how you enunciate it, right? Papyrus, uh,
I Yeah, early
right?
pay.
Yeah, early
Yeah.
paper, right? So, can you take us back for the purpose of taking viewers back, how to activate within themselves? Take us back to those early days when you were so drawn to write.
Oh, well, I've always wanted to write. I always loved to tell the story. I had a diary when I was 6 years old, one of those little red diaries, and so this would be 1967-ish, and it had three entries on each page, so probably 4 lines, 5 lines at the most.
Okay.
I wrote in it, so I feel like I've always been drawn to words and writing and story. I had the pretend friend that I played with, the imaginary friend. And then when I was in school, I always journaled. I was always writing in my own life.
Uh huh.
When I was in school, I did some writing projects. I was a journalism major at Ohio State, and I just my father would tell me, Rachel, you're a writer, be a writer. And so it was really his voice and his declaration over me that kicked me into play. And I really didn't see any other avenue. And once I got into journalism school and got out, I knew I wasn't really a reporter,
Okay.
and ended up, the Lord sent me down to this town called Melbourne, Florida, that I'd never been to before, even though I've lived in Florida most of my life, and worked for a computer company. And I knew nothing about computers, but the computers went in newspapers. It was for newspaper production, and I knew newspaper.
Mm.
Turns out I had a little bit of a gift for teaching, and I had a gift to understand the technical, even though it wasn't my number one favorite thing to do.
Okay.
And I was available to travel, and I wanted to travel. So that was my first professional job. I was in the computer world, the software world, and got married. and started reading a lot of Christian fiction. In the early 90s, Christian fiction was huge. Shelves and shelves of it at what was the Zondervan bookstore, the family
Yes.
bookstore. We all remember that. My husband and I didn't have a television in those days, and so we just read all the time. And that's when I knew. I always would tell people I eventually wanted to be a writer,
Uh-huh.
but I wasn't sure how. And the Lord just began to open doors, and a conference here, I met someone there. Diane Mills was very instrumental in me becoming a part of American Christian, what was then Romance Writers, and now
Yeah.
American Christian Writers, and served in that organization for 18 years. So yeah, it just became line by line, but always having that desire to do it and knowing that you can only put it off for so long.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you end up either not doing it or you're scrambling to do it. So
So you were saying, one thing I think is important for our viewers to hear is that you were saying words are important, were important, have always been important. Kind of like sounds like he who was and is to come.
yeah,
Right?
really,
But
funny.
also the influence that your dad, okay, and I don't want to, viewers to get stumped on. It could be a neighbor, it could be a coworker, it could be an aunt, it could be an uncle. It's not, well, I didn't have a dad, and then you get stuck in this trauma zone where you can't move past it, and then you're stuck your whole life, and you're in your 60s, and you got 30 years of counseling under your belt, right?
Right.
When no, we were, if we think of creation, and how the constant shifting, I'm going to call it, of creation, has creation ever motivated you through its constant change?
Well, I think people motivate me, and I think people are creation, obviously, of God. And so when I hear their stories, that's what motivates me. My husband always says, "Uh-oh," I get a certain look, or I start asking a lot of really pointed questions. He goes, "Wait a minute, what you say might end up in one of her books." And so I do kind of click in on people, and I want to go back to my dad thing
Yes.
too. Um, I also had professors and teachers encourage me.
Okay.
So, look for that encouragement wherever it's come from in your life, even if it's just you're good at it and you like it. That could be enough. And then you go to the Lord. When I first started writing, I initially had to go, Lord, look, this is going to consume me. Thinking up story, especially in the beginning, really consumes your mind. And I'm in prayer with the Lord, and I'm talking about writing a book and talking about characters that don't even really exist. But I said, you got to confirm this. And within the 3 months, he just began to open little doors, little confirmations. And I want to say this too, my writing journey, or what anybody's career journey ultimately, is not about publishing books or getting promotion or writing software or managing a store or whatever your career is. It's about being conformed to him. So every journey along the way has led me closer and closer to Jesus. And I really think that's got to be our focus on our life journey, whether you're a CEO or whether you're a mom homeschooling your children, or whether you're just getting married, whatever it is. How is this conforming me to look like Jesus and draw me closer to him? And so, there's been hiccups in my writing journey that led me to him, that brought me back to that place of, okay, you have to be preeminent in my life. So
That's really
don't
good,
give up.
Rachel. That is really good. I was actually in a meeting last night where there's a gentleman who wrote a book, and I'm about to interview him next week. Rethinking Rest. I'm like,
Oh
you
yeah,
gotta be
rest is
kidding, right?
rest
And
is
so,
common. Like everybody's talking about rest right
yes,
now. That's the fourth or
yes.
fifth time I've heard it.
Yes, but think of this. I was sharing with someone before I even got on this call. So I was talking to a biological sister, not the one you know, but a different one. Well, you might have met the other one at some time, but I have six sisters. But I was talking to her, and I said, "Sister, it's kind of like this. Remember the old school umbrellas that we had when we were little girls?" And they were clear, and they came all the way down. And that's her favorite thing, was to wear boots and splash in puddles, right? It just
Uh,
came all the way down, right? So I was telling her it's kind of like this. If you were to remove, no discredit, because I'm a strong believer, all the tainted views, which were pushed upon you of religiosity, and you were to remove it all, and it's just you and the Lord, and you're in your happy umbrella, right? Anytime you step out of that little girl space of calmness, right? You step somewhere, you almost want to say, whoa, 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 wait a minute, let's come back over here. That's removing the dis-ease, and that's where disease comes from, the dis-ease. Where that rest shifts, right, to bring yourself back under. So the question I have for you now is, could you share about a time when you stepped into something without names or like actual titles given, but the experience, right, where you stepped into something you thought, and then you thought, no, I don't think this is where I'm supposed to be, because as what we're doing is we're helping to ignite others to follow the voice of wisdom within themselves.
That is a really, really tough one for me, because I am super mindful and cautious. So I'm not entirely sure I have that clear point. I know that I had a boyfriend that I'm pretty sure was not from the Lord.
Okay.
You know, and I remember being in the midst of that. I'm 19 years old, and I remember being in the midst of that relationship and feeling like that sinking feeling like this is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. But you know, now I'm tangled up emotionally, and so you have to figure out, how am I going to get out of this? Is this, I don't want to hurt this person. But the Lord just had me in such a place where I had to choose either him or this guy. And and the guy ended up eventually coming to the Lord. He wasn't saved when I started dating him, but maybe from that experience and a couple of other young experiences, I just really went to the Lord about everything. So I'm not even sure some of my college endeavors were him. They were just things I wanted to do. In fact, I do tell this story. I left Tallahassee, Florida to go to Ohio State. My father was an Ohio State grad. I was born in Columbus. So the family had this Ohio State tradition, and I just wanted to go there. So I applied, I got in, I'd already finished junior college. So I go up there, and the whole time I'm asking the Lord, this is post that boyfriend I just talked about. I said, plug me into all the right places. And I lived with my grandparents for the first year until I could get situated. And I would ride the city bus down to campus because I wasn't in school yet, but I was working on the campus. And one night we were driving home on the bus, and I drove by this place that was one of the local hangouts, had a big plate glass window right by the dance floor. Okay. And there, all the kids were dancing and just having a great time. And I literally yearned. I wanted to be there. And then for the next 2 years, that's where I ended up. That I ended up in that environment. And I think the Lord was with me in it, because he had to bring me to the end of myself in that way, and discover that's not all it's cracked up to be either. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. I laughed a lot. But when I graduated, I was, all right, Lord, I'm yours. I've been yours since I was 6 years old. You kind of let me play in the mud puddle for a while. And not saying that all the relationships were mud puddle, not at all. But just, I was living for Rachel, and I was doing Rachel things, and I was doing worldly things. And I developed friendships that I love to this day, and I honor those people and those friendships. But I wasn't living for Jesus. So I get out of school, and I start going, okay, it's time to live for you. And there were a lot of other pressures that the Lord used to kind of get my attention. And, he ended up moving me supernaturally. So my MO from that point on became, I don't know what to do. You put me where you want me. And that night, the first time I ever prayed that prayer, that night, I got a telephone call from an old junior college buddy. Hey, I got this job down here in Melbourne, Florida. And like a month later, here I am. And I've been here ever since. I've been here for, I don't know, going on 40 years, 37 years. So, that became my MO. God, I don't know who to marry. You pick him. Yeah. Walked into church one day, there's the single youth and singles pastor. And that's a whole other story. We could do a whole video on that. So it just became, the sun's coming in my
Oh,
turret window.
it looks beautiful. I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's like your halo.
My halo, right. But anyway, to say, I just began to really surrender everything to the Lord. And how I started writing, I was in the same position. I think I just said it earlier. I was like, God, if you really want me to do this, I'm spending a lot of mental energy trying to make this happen. I don't even really know what to do or what to write, but I just knew I wanted to tell stories.
Yeah.
And I would read various authors that were popular in the early 90s, and I would think, oh, I don't know how to do that. I can't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But you know what? This is a funny story.
Okay.
I have traveled for my corporate job.
Okay.
And one year I went down to Venezuela 3 times. This was in the late 80s.
Okay.
And I went down to Venezuela 3 times to train their production room, their typesetting room, how to use our system.
Okay.
And so it was male dominated, and they were great guys. I got along with them, got to practice my Spanish. But one day while they were practicing, I started writing a story for a girl at church who would tell me, write me a story, write me a story. So I just started writing this little love story.
Okay.
And I sent it to the typesetter, which was the big machines. We didn't have printers like we had now. We had dot matrix printers. So I
Yeah.
sent it to the typesetter. It came out at the blower on the film. If they didn't look at it, they would have put it in the paper. But it was in English, so I guess they recognized it wasn't a news story. And they read it. They were all hovered around. I guess somebody who read English, I don't know how many of them could read English, but they were all hovered around reading my story. Funny. The funny part is, the next time I went back down, they said, Rachel, what happened to that girl? They wanted to know what happened to that girl. And it was literally probably 300, 400 words. It was not. It was just the setup of a story.
Yeah.
What happened to your story? So that kind of told me, maybe I got something here, So, but that was always my MO. God, what do you have? What do you want? I'm 100% available to you.
Yeah. That's great. And with that, would you say you've had a great measure of peace, mental peace,
Yeah.
by not trying to strive? And so you touched on that.
It's
And
always
yes.
tough. You always strive a little bit because it's a competitive business, and it's hard not to compare yourself. And even in that, even in the moments of anxiety, and anxiety is one of the things I have battled off and on, but the Lord has brought me through. I'm going to write a book about it someday. I got a whole fantastic testimony about that, the Word of God. But you do, again, that's why I go back to the journey. The Lord, I prayed, Lord, I want to be like you. I want to look like you. I want to serve like you. I want to love like you. But I can't do that if I'm full of envy and strife and jealousy and comparison and tearing myself down. You're not good enough. How come they don't like you at your publisher as much as they like that author? And how come the reviewers like her book better than my book? I was always told I was so talented. I was always told to write. So how come I'm not doing better? How come I'm not leading the pack, God? So you have to humble yourself completely, especially if you're a Christian and you want to display Christian character and the character of Jesus in any industry, whether you're, in the market or in the church, you've got to humble yourself. And so that means getting rid of the things that cause you not to be humble. I love to pray, Jesus, remove everything that hinders love. And so envy and jealousy and strife hinder love, and even being down on myself hinders love.
That's right.
So, God said, okay, let's do that. And he's been doing that like my whole adult life.
You touched on something, and especially within the last couple of years, has been pretty prevalent in our land. And I was in my office within the last month, and there was this day, kind of like you get a tap on the shoulder, like Father wants to tell you something. And I'm like instant, my ears are wide open, like, okay, what are you about to tell me, right? So this is what he tells me. He tells me, Shawn, I have to use visuals, okay? Mankind was created in my image. So they are to be a mirror image of me. That's what the Lord is saying, a mirror image of me, right? And little d has come along and tried to say, this is going to be a human. This is little d. You will bear my image. You will mirror me. But the Lord says, no, we do not have to cower to that, because we
Right.
were created in the image of the great I am. So
Right.
anytime those darkened thoughts start to come our direction, we don't have to say, I am that, because we were created in the image of the great I am. And I was just like, you gotta be kidding me, Lord. That is so profound. Mere
That is,
image.
and that's the thing that separates us from all other creation that God created, is he made us in his image. And so that's
So
beautiful.
I'd like to, okay, so how many books have you written for our
I'm going to
viewers?
say, I don't know, I think about 32 or 3. I always lose track. I don't know. Somewhere
You're,
like there.
you're right up there with another. I had the honor of interviewing Colette Cameron. And she's right up there with you. She's 32. I think she might have just finished her or published her 34th one.
Wow.
And I got to know her through meeting her daughter in a prayer room. We met at a prayer meeting one day. Me and her daughter. That's how I got to know her.
That's nice.
So can you talk to viewers before we get on to this most recent book and then what's developed from your most recent book? Talk to viewers, oh gosh. And my intention is not to step on creativity in other authors' space. My intention is for the outcome of how the human mind how the human mind chooses to entertain one's mind and the effects of it. Okay, so I would like you to touch on. I only know. Oh gosh, I don't want to say that word. Okay, my grandma was into racy books. That's what I want to leave it
Okay.
at that. Okay, this is a safe way to verbally communicate this. She was
Sure.
into racy books. Okay, um, and therefore those racy books um, uh, caused areas of her life to manifest in different directions.
Hmm.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about why you've chosen to write the way you have and how you came to that point?
That's a really great question. And I do think what we ingest informs our life. So, especially today. So, what we read, what we watch, what we listen to informs our life. And, that's, if you're a Christian, that's between you and the Lord. Although I think we have biblical standards on how to do that. And we all kind of do that journey together, or do that journey with the Lord, and within our families. But as far as my creative process, and why I write the way I write, that's been an ongoing between here conversation for the entire time I've been writing full time, which has been 20, almost 20 years full time, 19 years full time. And I think that it's that girl on the bus who prayed the whole way up to school, like, connect me with the Christian community, connect me with the church. But when I drove by the place where they were dancing and laughing and having fun, I was like, I think I'm going to go over there. And so there's the larger, when you're right in the Christian space, you're in a smaller space, you're in a smaller slice of the pie, so to speak. And so you think, well, if you wrote a little differently, you might be more in the general market. Not that you have to change who you are or what you write per se, but I feel like there's no way I can write any differently than what I do, because it's who I am. So we always, if you're an author out there, you've probably heard the saying, write what you know. Well, I know like this much. I can't write what I know. I can research what I don't know. We
Uh-huh.
really ultimately write who we are.
Huh.
And so who I am is a lover of Jesus. Who I am is a child of God. Who I am is a little girl who was sitting in a Sunday school class in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Can't remember the teacher's name. Don't even remember her face. Don't even remember what she was saying. But I left there knowing I needed Jesus in my heart. I knew I was a little girl who sinned and needed a redeemer. And I got saved and born again that night. And so that's who I am. And I'm not sure that I could write any different. And because I feel like I'm also responsible before the Lord about what I write and what I say. But literature is an influence. And so I want to influence in not write an agenda, because nobody wants to read agenda fiction, but I want to write in a way that informs you about life, informs you about faith, informs you about who Jesus is and can be to you, because he's legitimately doing that to the characters. And if we talk about the book, I can explain that a little bit better.
Yes.
But yeah,
So
I don't.
before we segue into that, it made me think of something. Within the last month, there was a day where there was a difficult situation going on in my world, and I'm like, Lord, I need to feel you. Like, I need to feel you. And I didn't feel him. And a little bit of time went by, and I had worship on and was worshiping him with my choice of words and through my actions. And I'm like, Lord, I am not playing. I need to feel you, and I do not feel you right now, right? And some more time passes by. And then I said it again, Lord, I need to feel your love. I then see what I call in the spiritual realm a vision. And my spirit man of a girl is draped over her dad's lap in a bucket of tears, just crying as he's consoling me. And my heart just melted in my father's arms, because that's how real he is. And so Rachel has a book, The Best Summer of Our Lives. So tell our viewers, like, where did that thought even, like, tell us the first initial thought, and then how you came into agreement with that thought, and then you begin to roll with that thought.
Yeah. Well, originally the title was The Summer of 77.
Okay.
And there was a general market book called The Summer of 69. And I thought, that's pretty cool. You know, looking back in that mid 20th century, and, you know, we all aware the Bryan Adams song, the 1969. And I thought, that's kind of feels nostalgic to me. And I was 16, the summer of 77. And so we moved from South Florida up to Tallahassee. And it was a time of change. And I just thought, okay, that's my original idea. So at the time I was writing independently and writing some royal books called the True Blue Royals. Get those books, guys, they're super fun. And if you love audio, the audio reader of that book is fabulous. I'm just going to say it. She made me love the book in a whole new way. Anyway, if you love that British accent, she kills it. She's just so good. Okay. Anyway, I had this idea, and I knew that I would need to partner with a publisher for this idea of 4 best friends the summer of 1977 between high school and college. So they're all graduated from high school, headed to Florida State together. And I knew, you know, a little on the nose that one of the characters would probably be named Summer, the summer of 77. Just, you know, I'm not a big fan of those kind of titles, but I thought, what the. So in that season, I was really doing some deep work with the Lord and some issues in my life. And really kind of, just to be honest, overcoming and battling and getting to the root of some anxiety that started hitting me out of the blue and that year. And so I'm walking with the Lord every evening at 5 in Florida in the summer. I'm sweating like crazy, but I was out there walking and talking with God, quoting scripture, praying in the word. And so I started thinking about the book, and I thought, well, what if I had 4 characters, and what if they were all seasonal names? Spring, autumn, and then I went with snow for winter. And so I'm like, okay, who are these characters? And so as I put together the story, it was really about them desiring to have the best summer of their lives. And so that's how I morphed the title. I felt it was a more appealing title, a more encompassing title. So if you weren't interested in the summer of 77, you might be interested in the best summer of your life. And that's kind of how the story came together. My agent and I pitched it to Bethany House, and they bought it. And so that's kind of how the story came about. And then I was always looking for an outside fear factor, because I think through COVID, that's one of the things that we experienced was this outside fear factor, this disease that we weren't sure about. We weren't sure the rate of the speed that it traveled. We weren't, who did it affect the most? How deadly was it? You know, what we were just like kind of learning like this, it just had this outside fear factor in society and really across the globe. And so, not that I was intending to do that, but I had moved to Tallahassee the season that Ted Bundy murdered the girls at Florida State. And I was thinking it was that summer. And while I was not going to write about Ted Bundy in any way, I researched him and I had to quit because it was
too much.
Too much. But it was the wrong time. It was in the winter of 78. So thank goodness. And then my husband found another situation, and this was really sad. There were 3 little girls killed at a Girl Scout camp the summer of 77, just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so the story really became about how we respond to those outside factors, those things that come at us externally that we can't control. And my girls are camp counselors, and they don't even know how to be a camp counselor. They got in trouble, and so this was their assignment to go be camp counselors with Summer's mother. But they all go out there with secrets. And so it's really about, are we having the best summer of our lives? No, we don't want to be camp counselors. And are we going to have our dream to go to college together, join a sorority together, you know, be each other's bridesmaids and maids of honor? Like, are we going to have this? They've been friends for 12 years and they managed to survive junior high and high school. They're like sisters to one another. But this summer really challenges everything that they believe and everything that they think they are. And so and then I have this external fear factor. You know, what happens when someone else decides to inflict, you know, whoever murdered the girls, it's still a cold case. Whoever did that decided that he had the right to choose whether these girls live or not. And so so it's a little bit of a thread. But the story is funny. On top of that, the story is fun and funny, and there's a little bit of romance for Summer in the story, and it's a real reckoning with Jesus. And so I will say this, because I wrote it in the back of the book. So as I was finishing the story, I was in the prayer room at our church, and I just went into the sanctuary by myself just to be alone with the Lord. And I'm telling you, the moment, and I've been at this church since 1987, the moment I walked through the doors into a quiet, dark sanctuary, the Lord said to me, "We've spent a lot of time in this room, haven't we?" And I lost it. I'm going to lose it. I lost it. I was on the carpet weeping and weeping. And he began to speak to me about the character Summer. And he said, she has taken this long worldly journey. She had an encounter with Jesus. I called him the preacher when she was at camp. And then she took this whole journey to try to become successful in music. And here she is back in this small town. And the Lord just impressed on me, you were going to always be in this place. It was just with me or without me. And so I believe that as believers, sometimes we take that, and you mentioned that earlier, we take that road that, well, he's not in it, but somehow we end up back where he always wanted us to be. And sometimes we have more luggage than we would have preferred, but he gets us where he wants as we surrender to him. And so, I mean, in the midst of that, and that's really how the Lord invaded the story in just this little slice of Summer's life. And he just keeps encountering her, and you see him working her life. And so what I like to do when I write little supernatural threads is, if we could see the supernatural breaking into the natural, what would it look like? If we could be like, who was it, Gideon, that the Lord opened his eyes and he could see
Yes.
all of the host of the army of the Lord around him. If we could see, if the Lord did that, you know, we would be like, wow. And so that's kind of what I love to do in story. And because my characters were as flawed and as in trouble as any kind of characters, but somebody always meets the Lord in some way throughout the story. And he just says those beautiful words that he says that I pull from scripture, or in that case that I felt like he encountered me in that room, and it did line up with scripture. I just want to be clear on that. Yeah. And that's what changes the book for me. And that's his little piece. I always ask the Lord, how do you want to show up in the story? So
Oh gosh.
anyway, so that's kind
But
of
it
how I
didn't stop as a book, did it?
do what?
It didn't stop as a book, did it?
Mm.
So then what happened?
With me?
No. It didn't stop as a book. Right? So which one of your books went to Hallmark?
Oh, right. There you
Yes,
go. Sorry. All
hello.
right. I'm with you. I'm with
Come
you.
on.
Yeah,
What are you doing, Rachel?
I'm with you. So Once Upon a Prince was made
Yeah.
into an original movie, which I was super excited about and super fun. Thought they did a great job with it. Kept so much of the story that was there, which I was really thrilled about. So, yeah, Once Upon a Prince, original Hallmark movie.
So good. That started out as a book, so we don't know, right? I was thinking of the importance of stories, right? And you would be familiar because of the amount of time you've walked with the Lord. But during our interview, I've heard Sandy Patty's song, Daniel was thrown in the lion's den for believing in the Lord, right? Still he could
Yeah,
hear the, hold on. Daniel was thrown in the lion's den for believing in the Lord. He knew the Lord was with him, still he could hear the lions roar. Just when he thought all hope was gone and his faith was just a hunch, Daniel put his faith in God and the lions lost their lunch, right? So if we think of stories, right? Daniel in the lion's den, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, David and Goliath, right? My all-time favorite is the axe did float.
yeah,
It's my all-time favorite. The axe did float, right? And
that's so
so
true.
if we think of it, lights, let's see, light bulbs. I love to think of the fact that we are all still benefiting from Edison walking out a thought, right? And how many of us have sat down to hear somebody's story, right? Or
Yeah,
watched a movie and thought, wow, that was good time spent, right?
yeah,
And over the years, I've always prayed for decades, Father, raise somebody up in my family line to produce movies, because I watch stories, and we could all name a plethora of different stories that we've seen that have enriched us or compelled us to want to go longer, to push a little harder, right? And so, where do I want to go with this, Lord? This is where I want to go. I would like you to write a story of someone who is watching this interview. And you're going to take them from where they are right this second to where they could be in moments.
right now.
Right now. Right now.
I don't know, man. I'd have to think about that. I'm not very. I have to think
Don't
about a
think.
lot of things when I
No,
come up with this story.
no. I just want you to think. I just want you just for a second, because this is a different way we're going to do an invitation. Okay.
Okay.
You can speak from a male perspective, and you can speak from a female perspective. I'm going to share a song while
Sure.
while you're creating the character. Okay. So years ago, running a paper route. Oh my gosh, it was in the early 90s. And one day I was the receiver of a song. And here were the words. When I was a child, we sang about your greatness, how big you are, how big you are. When I was a teen, we learned about your coming, what I must do to stay in your will. But somewhere along the line, my eyes have become blind, you're seldom on my mind. Bring me back to the cross of Calvary. Bring me back to the greatness I used to believe. Bring me back to the cross of Calvary. Bring me back to my Jesus so tenderly. Life has many trials, answers that we cannot see. Daily we must make a choice. Which one will we choose? Will we choose the cross with its victories, or will we settle for the enemy and all his defeats? Tell me, who will you choose? Who will you choose? Then it goes on to say, bring me back.
That's good. I have a chorus that I sing
Okay.
out of Isaiah 11 and a little bit of Psalm 23. And it's just really super simple because Jesus says that he'll strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, which is his word. And we know out of his mouth comes a sharp two-edged sword. So it says, bring me back by the hook, bring me back, now strike my heart with the rod of your word and bring me back by the hook of your staff, which is out of Psalm 23. Can't remember the melody now because your melody's in my head.
But our melodies are the lyrics and the melodies merge together.
Yeah.
So the invitation for someone, anyone, millions are viewing, and you're going to give an invitation, welcoming them.
You want me to do that?
I do.
I'm trying to understand.
I do. I want you to give an invitation. I don't want to call it the official Christian terminology. I just want you to give an invitation to the Creator, for the Creator.
I think that if I was telling a story, you would be a female, a woman, and you're kind of tired, you're confused, maybe you don't know what you believe. Maybe you've believed, and you're like the song where you knew the Lord once, or you have some church background, but you've walked away because it didn't seem to fulfill your heart's desire. And so you're cruising on YouTube looking for something to watch. Maybe you're looking for some music. You've listened to some of the worship music. Maybe you've listened to some oldies. Maybe you've listened to the latest Taylor Swift. But now you're here listening to this interview, and you've heard my story and you've heard a little bit of Shawn's story. But what you want to know is, what is your story? And I'm telling you that your story is locked in his heart, so that in him, we live and move and have our being. And maybe you're a man and you spend some time on the internet and you're tired, you're weary, you don't feel good about yourself, you're not sure about work, you're not sure about your marriage. Maybe you do. Maybe you are on top of the world. You got a great partner, you got a great thing going, you've touched on faith, maybe you have never touched on faith, but you've heard people talk about it and you're not sure about those Christians. But I'm telling you, Jesus supersedes any religion. He supersedes it. His love supersedes it. His care for you supersedes it. And in him, you live and move and have your being. If you want to know who you are, if you want to know who you are, and I'm telling you from my own personal experience, that I had to go to him to find out who I was. Because I really didn't know, even though I grew up in a great home. I grew up with values. I grew up with faith. but I needed Jesus to tell me, this is what I've called you to do. And it's more than being called to do something. Maybe you're a solid believer. You've watched this video. You love listening to the people that she brings in. You love listening to these author interviews or creator interviews. And you're in church, you're involved, but you're like, what do you want me to do? And I'm going to tell you what we used to tell youth all the time when Tony and I were youth pastors. We would say, don't do, be. It starts with being at his feet. It starts with being with him. Adam and Eve walk with God in the cool of the day. That hasn't changed. God desires to walk with us. And when we're with him in the being, in his presence, and maybe we're just worshiping, reading our Bible, praying, meditating on him, out of that comes the doing. We got to wait for him to show us what to do. And that's really where I was when I shared earlier that I didn't know. I needed to know that you called me to write because I was going to spend a lot of time doing it. And if you hadn't called me to that, I didn't want to do it. Here was my statement. I don't want to stand before you and account for wasted time because I have too much of that on the books already. I have too much of that already. So, to the seeker, maybe to the one who feels lost, maybe you're just randomly going by here. You need to know that Jesus is the Son of God and he died for you and he loves you and he has a purpose for you. And that purpose begins with him. And I just want to say this one last thing. We talk a lot about we're all God's children, but Romans 8 makes it clear that we're his children because we believe in him.
That's right.
We're all created by God.
Yes.
We're all gifted by God. I think some of the most gifted people in the world maybe don't know God. Some of them do, but we're all created by God. We're all gifted by God. But to be a child of God,
Right.
Romans 8 says that he conformed us to be in the image of his son so that he's the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. So, and also Matthew 5, we know that well. If you've grown up in the church at all, you know the Beatitudes. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. But blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called a child of God, children of God. Well, how do we make peace? We have to make peace. We think it's horizontal, and it is. It's also vertical. Blessed are those who make peace with God through his son, through the death, resurrection, and blood of his son on the cross, and his death and resurrection, because they will be called his children when we make peace with him through Jesus. So I invite you to make peace with God through Jesus and become a child of God.
Thank you, Rachel. I value that immensely. And for our viewers who have not come to the saving knowledge of King Jesus, right? Please note that not at one point did Rachel share in the invitation, you have to go to church 9 times a week, okay? You got to she didn't give you a to-do list because we're called and created to respond. That's what we're called and created to do. We're called to respond to the lover of our souls. And I can tell you since 1984, he is a good, oh, so good God.
Absolutely.
And Rachel's given us that glimpse. And so just for all of our viewers, I want you to know that in the about of this interview, you will find all the future contact information and how to get a hold of Rachel, should you so desire, all of her social media platforms and whatnot. And we look forward to how many more books are under your belt or underneath the cap of the lid of your brain, right? What else is in there?
Yeah.
What else is in there? I can't thank you enough, Rachel. What an honor it has been
Thank you.
to watch your life. And if you could just stay on for a few minutes afterwards, that would be amazing. Not a lot of minutes, just a minute, okay? But for all of our viewers, I want to thank you for coming to this episode of Sagionic 1027. And until our next episode and our next guest, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you always. Blessings. Bye.